Hello, I'm the Grub Street Vlogger and welcome to September's Gloomph. Now, September is a month when I have to go back to work. It's also been a month when I've been doing quite a lot of writing, so I haven't read as many books this month. There's only 5, so let's get on with it, shall we? The first book I read this month was called Last Orders by Graham Swift. I actually got it in quite an interesting way. My sister signed me up for a surprise book group, and I got 3 books, one a month, and I didn't know what they were going to be, and they're all pretty good choices, and this was one of them. I have a collection of Graham Swift short stories knocking about on these shelves down here. I haven't read them yet, actually, but I might now, because I did very much enjoy Last Orders. It's the story of a group of men from London, and one of them's died, and his ashes are being taken to Margate to be thrown into the sea as part of his last orders. And it consists of his best friend, sort of the Joker of the group, the Undertaker, who's also one of their mates, and his adopted son. And as they go, they are trapped in a car together, and all their past sort of unravel and come out a bit. It's quite understated in some ways. Like the actual action, except for sort of a big fight, is grumbling. It's very English, but there are chapters that then take us back to find out what are the deep sort of torments and boiling up between these people. It was good. It was written in a sort of Mockney accent. Really, it wasn't quite Cockney, but it was a pretty decent book. It was very enjoyable. And one of the things I really liked was they went into a number of famous places. They went into Rochester, down the high street there, and they went to the Canterbury Cathedral. And it showed their relationship to these things. That the man narrating thought Rochester was too pretty for him to be allowed to walk down the streets. And that Canterbury Cathedral was sitting there saying, "Oi, I'm Canterbury Cathedral, what's it to you?" There's a sort of, they're not allowed to take part in beauty. And yeah, it was quite an interesting book about, I suppose you could say, working class Englishmen getting in touch with their feelings. Written by I don't think, very working class Englishman, to be honest. But a good book, pretty entertaining. Yeah, enjoyed it. The second book I read this month was called The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. And I'd read an earlier book of hers at the beginning of the year. I'd read Elizabeth and Her German Garden in January, and I'd utterly loved it. It's not really a novel. I can't really tell you what it is. It's a fictionalised account of her experience of building, constructing, putting together a beautiful garden in Germany. This one was slightly more novelised, but again based on her experiences. So 4 women go to a castle in Italy where the relaxed lifestyle, the sunshine and the beauty of the flowers and the plants and just Italy in general brings them out of themselves, makes them their true persons, their true people, and they solve the issues that have happened in their lives. Oddly, it kind of contrasted to Last Orders. They had a lot in common in some ways. There are 4 different characters in each, and sort of getting back into their true selves and their past selves. They had a lot in common. I particularly like Mrs. Wilkins, who was sort of the lead in this. She was a nervous, put upon housewife when she was in London, and then when she gets to Italy, she just gives in to beauty and she becomes honest and true and a little bit unhinged, but in a really kind way. And it's not quite as witty or as funny as Elizabeth and Her German Garden, but it was enchanting. Yeah, An Enchanted April is enchanting. And I probably should have read it in April. The next book I read was Planets by Dana Sobel. She wrote the Longitude book, which I've been meaning to read for ever. And I was going to read it, but I picked up Planets instead off my shelf. I decided to read that. It's a beautiful looking book. It's beautifully designed. It has all these pictures inside. Each chapter has a astrological symbol to represent which planet it's talking about. and we're studying planets with the kids at school, so I thought I'd gen up on my knowledge a bit. That was why I picked this one. What I liked about it was that it's not a straightforward non-fiction. Here are some planets, these are some facts, blah 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 blah. It's more of a commonplace book. It's a collection of stories, myths, facts, feelings, personal reflections about each of the planets as each one goes on. I like this sort of book. I'm going to reach down here. This is one I've got about beds. And it's just different writers talking about beds. Poems about beds, thoughts when lying in bed, pictures of beds. It's just beds, 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 beds. I've got other ones of those about curry, about sweets, another one about the Industrial Revolution. I like these sort of collection commonplace books, so I really did enjoy Planets. The only thing that I was a bit miffed by was that for some reason Dava Sobel really seems to hate the moon. Why? What's wrong with the moon? She calls it whining. I know it rhymes with waning, but still, whining moon, that's not fair. So the next book I read was called The Stranger Diaries by Elly Griffiths. This is a book that I was lent, and it was very different to a lot of the books I read, in that it was, it was new. It came out in hardback last year, paperback this year, and it was very, 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 very definitely set in a time and place. It was set 2 years ago. And you can tell this because they're talking about specific people on Strictly Come Dancing, and they talk about going to see the new Blade Runner film and that it's boring, and the references are really, really specific for that time and that place. Refers to specific episodes of Have I Got News for You, for example. And I'm not used to a book being quite as specific as that, because I think the stuff I read tends to want to last a bit longer, but this was quite happy to just be right, we are of this time. And it's a murder mystery, and the murder is tied up with a short story called The Stranger, which is a kind of M.R. James Edwardian short story, except for the fact that it really isn't. It includes bits of this short story throughout the book, and it's really modern. The author didn't really get into the whole pretending to be Edwardian bit for that, but hey. And it was a good mystery, and I quite enjoy a mystery book because I like putting my experience trying to write mystery and of reading them into solving whodunit. And the experience, the journey was really good fun until I found out whodunit. And it kind of was who I thought it would be, but it wasn't exactly. And this is the first time I've ever read a whodunit book where I thought, no, the author is wrong. That is not whodunit. This person did it. They may have helped, which was my original thought, but no, it was that person, because that person has a way more interesting motive than the person you've got who doesn't really have a motive. The person that lent me the book said that they thought it was good fun until the end, and they didn't know why they were disappointed by the end, and that's why they asked me to read it, to see if I could think of some reasons, and that's the reason I've thought of, that whodunit is wrong. So there you go. Never done that before. Read a book and just went, no, you are wrong with your own story. But hey. And finally, I'm reading Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding. Now, this is actually the book that got me into 18th century novels in the first place, about 12, 13 years ago now. I fell in love with it and I looked for more things like it, and that is why I'm now where I am now, writing all these 18th century things, going to my Samuel Johnson book group. I write their blog, I write my blog. Soon I'm going to be volunteering on a Saturday morning at Samuel Johnson House too. I'm looking forward to that. That starts next weekend. So yeah, this book in some way really changed my life. And yeah, it's no Tom Jones. It starts with Henry Fielding taking a piss of Pamela again. Before he did it as Shamala, where the main character Shamala isn't really as innocent as she feels, and she knows it's all a plot to get Mr. B's money. In this one, Mr. B's sister, Mrs. B, and it turns out B stood for Booby the whole time, tries to overcome the chastity of her footmen, which are a species of people not known to have much chastity. The footman being Joseph Adams. So Joseph Andrews, sorry. So he runs away and he meets up with Parson Adams. That's where the Adams come from. And you kind of get the feeling that Henry Fielding didn't know what to do with the book and then came up with Parson Adams and thought, oh, this is brilliant. And so the rest of the book is essentially the Parson Adams show. He's a hypocritical parson, but he's not hypocritical in the usual way. He says all this sort of cold, emotionless stuff, but then he acts like a warm-hearted, friendly, passionate man. And so he gets in lots of fights, for example, and he gets extremely emotional. At the same time, he's saying, God wouldn't want us to get emotional. He wouldn't want us to feel bad about what happens because it's all part of the plan. And at the same time, he's in floods of tears because he thinks his son's died. And then seconds later, when he finds the son hasn't died, he's in joy. And of course, that's natural, that's normal, but it's the conflict between what he says and how he acts. It's hypocritical in a good sense. He's a better man than he appears, or than he tries to be, than he says he. Yeah, it's a very good book. It has that Henry Fielding style that I like, where he's constantly getting involved in the action and talking about how he came up with the story or how he discovered the facts and things like that, which I very much like. It's not as smooth as Tom Jones and the plot isn't as tight and there aren't as many big characters, but as a dry run for it, it's a really good book. And if you want to try and get into 18th century fiction, I think it's probably one of the better ways you can start. And so that's all my September books. Thank you for listening.